Imagine being like 20 years old, right? You spent your entire conscious life preparing for this quiet, totally predictable existence.
Surrounded by old books and archives.
Exactly. You're a scholar. You're built for the library, surrounded by the scent of parchment. But then, on one single day, your entire trajectory just gets violently rewritten.
Oh, violently is the perfect word for it.
Right. You are suddenly thrust onto this rain-slicked stone bridge. It's only 18 inches wide, and it is suspended 200 feet in the air.
Which is just terrifying to even picture.
It's insane. The wind is howling, tearing at your clothes, basically threatening to rip you right off the stone. And one single slip means instant death.
And if that wasn't bad enough, you got people behind you.
Yeah. The people lined up behind you are actively, aggressively trying to push you off that ledge just so they can take your place.
It's such an incredibly visceral scenario. And, what makes it truly chilling is that it isn't some exaggerated metaphor. That bridge is a literal physical filtration system designed to kill people who don't measure up.
It really is.
It perfectly encapsulates the sheer, unadulterated adrenaline of the world we're stepping into today.
Totally. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are embarking on this massive, highly detailed exploration of the romantasy phenomenon that has, quite honestly, completely rewired the literary landscape. I mean, we're talking about Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
Such a huge cultural moment.
Absolutely massive. And we aren't just doing some high-level skim here. We have a laser focus on the crucial first 10 chapters of this book. We've gathered this towering stack of sources, chapter summaries, exhaustive psychological character analyses, pacing breakdown.
Even reader reviews, right?
Yeah, reviews from readers who literally noted their heart rate spiking while turning the pages. It's wild. Our mission today is to meticulously unpack Violet Sorrengail's harrowing transition from this fragile scribe candidate to a lethal dragon rider.
And for anyone diving into this, whether you're a seasoned fantasy aficionado who loves getting lost in complex geopolitical world building, or if you're just insanely curious about why this specific book skyrocketed to cultural dominance, we are going to extract the most potent insights for you.
Yes, the absolute core takeaways.
Right. We're diving deep into the mechanics of survival, the psychology of asymmetrical strategy, and just the brutal, unforgiving meritocracy of the Basgiath War College.
And to understand how someone even survives an environment like that, we have to look at the architecture of Basgiath War College itself, because it is, frankly, completely unforgiving.
It's basically a fortress.
Exactly. It's located in the Kingdom of Navarre, built directly into this imposing mountain. And society there is highly stratified. The military college totally reflects that by being divided into 4 distinct quadrants.
Right, so you've got the scribes.
Yeah, which is where Violet was supposed to go. Deep underground, acting as the historians, lawmakers, protectors of the archives. Then you've got the healers doing their essential medical work. The infantry, which is the massive grinding backbone of the army. And then,
high up in the citadel.
Yes, separated from everyone else, you have the Riders Quadrant.
And the Riders Quadrant sits at the absolute apex of this society's hierarchy. I mean, they are the untouchable elite. But our sources highlight a really grim reality here.
That prestige comes with a heavy price tag.
A massively heavy one. That prestige is paid for with an astronomical mortality rate. And to understand why the society even accepts this, you really have to look at the geopolitical landscape.
Navarre has been at war for a long time, right?
400 years. They've been locked in this bitter, bloody war against the neighboring kingdom of Pormiel. And the world building around this conflict is fascinating because of the distinct magical ecologies of the two nations. Navarian forces bond with and ride dragons,
while Pormiel rides griffins.
Exactly. And Navarre's primary defense relies on these massive magical wards, essentially this invisible shield powered by dragon magic. It prevents non-dragon magic from functioning within their borders.
So the riders are quite literally the only thing standing between the citizens of Navarre and complete annihilation, which really brings us to chapters 1 through 4 and the entry into this brutal world.
Conscription Day.
Yeah. Chapter 1 introduces us to Conscription Day. And they do not sugarcoat it. The military literally calls it the deadliest day of the year. Violet Sorrengail, our protagonist, is forced out of the scribe quadrant and into the Riders Quadrant by her own mother.
General Lilith Sorrengail, which is a whole dynamic we need to unpack later.
Oh, we definitely will. But right off the bat, the very first test they face is the parapet.
The parapet is that horrifying bridge you described in the intro. According to the chapter breakdowns and the historical lore in the text, roughly 15 to 18% of the candidates die just trying to cross this bridge.
That's an insane statistic for day one.
They fall to their deaths before they even see a single classroom. The psychological impact of this on the characters and the reader is just immediate and profound. I mean, we see Violet meet this boy named Dylan.
Oh, the Dylan scene is so tough.
It really is. He seems capable, they exchange a few words, and moments later, the wind just catches him. He slips and falls 200 feet to his death.
And they don't even stop.
No. The narrative doesn't pause for mourning. The instructors don't blink. The line literally just keeps moving forward.
I was reading through the reviews and the historical context, and I just kept thinking about the sheer logistics of this. Like, this isn't an entrance exam. It's a meat grinder dressed as a magical university.
That's a great way to put it.
But I have to ask the obvious question here. I mean, does an army really get stronger by intentionally killing off 15 to 20% of its willing new recruits on the very first day?
It seems counterintuitive.
Right. Is there any tactical advantage to this, or is this just, like, institutionalized trauma masquerading as a training program? Because from a purely numbers-based military perspective, throwing away willing bodies seems incredibly foolish.
I completely see why you'd draw that conclusion from a traditional military perspective, but the text actually points in a completely different direction. If we look at the lore, this brutal culling isn't a human military strategy at all.
Wait, it's not.
No, it is intrinsically fundamentally tied to the dragons. The human leadership didn't just wake up one day and decide to be sadistic. They are essentially forced to mimic the ruthlessness of the apex predators they rely on.
So the dragons are actually dictating the curriculum.
Entirely. The sources emphasize this point heavily. Dragons do not respect fragility, they incinerate it.
Literally.
Literally. If a human shows weakness, hesitation, or fear, a dragon will not simply reject them, they will burn them alive on the spot. So the parapet and all the college's subsequent physical trials are explicitly designed to weed out anyone who would provoke a dragon's deadly instincts.
Wow. So they're culling the herd so the dragons don't have to.
Exactly. The human military literally cannot afford to present weak candidates to the dragons because doing that insults the dragons and jeopardizes the fragile symbiosis they've maintained for 600 years.
The dragons hold all the cards.
Every single one.
Okay, that reframes it completely. The humans are doing the dirty work themselves before the dragons can get offended and burn everything down. And they really bake this reality into the daily culture of the college, don't they?
Oh yeah, every single day.
Chapter 4 details this horrific morning ritual called the death roll. Every morning, a scribe stands up in the courtyard and reads aloud the names of the cadets who fell the day before. It's just a constant, inescapable drumbeat of mortality.
It completely strips away any illusion that you are safe just because you made it across the bridge. You're living in a manufactured state of nature where only the fittest survive.
And you hear about it every morning over breakfast.
Right. By reading those names every morning, the leadership forces the cadets into an immediate, permanent mindset of extreme situational awareness. You aren't just reading about battle tactics in a textbook. You are navigating a live battlefield from the moment you wake up.
So what does this all mean for someone who isn't the fittest? Because to survive a system entirely designed for the physically elite, what happens when a physically fragile recruit is dropped directly into the center of the arena?
This is where the narrative actively subverts typical fantasy expectations, which I love. In a lot of fantasy, the protagonist discovers they have some secret, latent physical prowess.
Like they're secretly a master swordswoman or something.
Exactly. But not Violet. She has trained her entire life to be a scribe. Furthermore, the author has confirmed, and the text clearly shows through her symptoms, that Violet suffers from a chronic physical condition.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, right?
Yes, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS. It's a connective tissue disorder, so it means her joints subluxate or slip out of place easily, her ligaments tear, and her bones break under pressure that a normal cadet could easily shrug off.
Which makes this environment actively lethal to her, just on a basic physical level.
Exactly. Her physical fragility is not just some minor inconvenience or a quirky character trait. It is a massive, life-threatening liability in a quadrant where brute force is the absolute baseline.
Which makes her survival strategies in chapters 2, 5, 7, and 8 absolutely brilliant.
Right.
I mean, let's look closely at the parapet in chapter 2. She's up there on this 18-inch ledge. The wind is screaming. The rain is making the stone slick.
And she knows her body could betray her.
Yeah, she knows medically her knee could dislocate at any second. So what does she do? She uses her scribe training. She starts reciting obscure Navarian history to ground her mind.
It's a fascinating technique.
She deliberately focuses her intellect to suppress her body's physiological panic response. She literally thinks her way across the bridge.
It is a remarkable cognitive coping mechanism. She completely separates her mind from her body's terror, and her reliance on intellect over brawn doesn't stop when she's on solid ground.
Not at all, because she immediately runs into Jack Barlow.
Right. Once she crosses the parapet, she is targeted by Jack. He is the quintessential, brutal, towering cadet. I mean, he literally throws another candidate off the bridge simply because they were walking too slowly.
Just casually murders a guy for being slow.
Yes. And then he promises to kill Violet next. But Violet does not try to outmuscle him. She physically cannot win that fight. Instead, she pulls a dagger and holds it directly to his groin.
The ultimate equalizer.
Exactly. But it's not just about having a weapon. She leverages the Quadrant's own strict, barbaric legal code against him.
Oh, right. The rules about witness murder.
Yes. She knows the rules state that witness murder is an executable offense unless it occurs during a designated sparring match. So she verbally reminds him of this rule while holding the blade to a vital artery. She uses the law itself as a shield for her physical vulnerability.
See, here's where it gets so compelling to me. Look at chapters 6 and 7. She finds this hidden survival journal written by her late older brother, Brennan, who is a legendary writer before he died.
Such a huge turning point for her.
It really is. And using this journal, she doesn't learn how to punch harder. She figures out the logistical algorithm of the sparring rotations. She deduces exactly who she is going to fight before they even step onto the mat.
So she knows who's coming.
Exactly. So she sneaks out at night, uses her deep academic knowledge of foraging and botany, and gathers poisonous berries. And then in chapter 8, she secretly poisons her opponent, a cadet named Orrin Seifert, by slipping it into his breakfast.
It's so cunning.
When they finally get on the mat, he's so violently ill he can barely stand, let alone fight, and she just easily sweeps his legs and wins.
In a purely martial environment, brute force is the standard currency. Everyone is trading in muscle and speed. But Violet introduces a completely different currency, asymmetric warfare through intellect. She redefines what it means to be strong in this setting.
It's like she's a hacker in a fistfight.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, she knows she can't win by punching harder or punching faster. So she literally writes a backdoor code into the fight itself by poisoning the breakfast. It's a brilliant conceptual leap, but I have to push back on this strategy from a world-building perspective.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is this actually sustainable? I mean, you can't sneak into a Griffin Riders camp on an active battlefield and just poison their oatmeal, right? It feels like a cheat code that won't hold up in the real world outside the college.
I wouldn't call it a cheat code. I'd call it a temporary, necessary paradigm shift. And the narrative actually acknowledges your exact point later on. The poison is definitely not a long-term battlefield strategy.
Okay, so it's a stopgap.
Exactly. But let's look at why it's so vital in these specific early chapters. Her scribe training, her ability to research, cross-reference data, memorize botanical texts, and deduce patterns is the only thing keeping her breathing.
It gets her through the week.
Right. It establishes the central thematic core of her character. Knowledge is literal power. A hacker eventually has to step away from the keyboard and face the real world, yes. But the poison buys her time. It buys her the weeks she desperately needs to build her physical endurance and survive long enough to find a more permanent solution.
That makes sense. It keeps her name off that morning death roll while she physically adapts to the environment. But looking at her background, it really begs the question, how did a girl who was so perfectly built for the quiet academic life of the archives end up on this lethal obstacle course in the first place?
That is the big question.
And the answer to that lies in some deeply complicated, frankly toxic family dynamics. The dynamic between General Lilith Sorrengail, Violet's mother, and Lieutenant Mira Sorrengail, her older sister, is fascinating.
Chapter 1 sets this family stage beautifully, and it is just fraught with tension. We are introduced to two incredibly powerful military women who serve as the opposing poles of Violet's existence.
Starting with Lilith.
Right. General Lilith Sorrengail is the commanding general of the entire army. She is the one who abruptly forces Violet into the Riders Quadrant just 6 months before conscription day, completely derailing Violet's life plan.
Just pulls the rug right out from under her.
Completely. And Lilith views physical weakness with absolute cold disdain. The text suggests she blames Violet's late father, who was a scribe, for sheltering Violet in the library and making her soft.
Lilith is terrifying. I mean, she literally tells Violet that as her commanding general, she will not acknowledge their familial connection for the next 3 years. She strips away every single ounce of maternal warmth or protection.
She offers zero comfort.
None. But then you have Mira. Mira is a fiercely competent dragon rider, a distinguished lieutenant, and she fights viciously against this decision. She screams at their mother, calling this conscription a death sentence for Violet.
Mira represents this highly practical, actionable love. When she realizes that arguing with Lilith is utterly futile because Lilith is the commanding general and the order is absolute, Mira immediately shifts her mindset.
She goes into problem-solving mode.
Exactly. She shifts from emotional protest to pure tactical strategy. She physically unpacks Violet's bag, tossing out heavy books to lighten her load because she knows Violet's joints just can't handle the weight.
Such a smart move.
And she gives Violet her own rubber-soled boots to ensure she has a physical grip on the rain-slicked stone of the parapet. But most importantly, she gives Violet a custom-made corset lined with scales from her own dragon, Tairn.
Which is basically illegal, isn't it? Or at least highly frowned upon.
Definitely bends the rules. This corset acts as hidden, lightweight armor. Mira doesn't just witch Violet well. She physically equips her to survive the unsurvivable.
So we have this supportive, deeply loving sister and the seemingly sociopathic mother. But I really want to challenge the surface reading of Lilith here based on some of the character analyses we looked at.
Oh, the psychological breakdown of Lilith is complex.
It is. We have to ask this question. Is General Lilith sending Violet to die simply to purge the family of an embarrassing, fragile weakness? Or is she the only one who genuinely believes Violet is resilient enough to survive?
That's a huge debate among readers.
Right, because in the text, Lilith actually notes that Violet deals with more chronic physical pain before lunch than other cadets deal with in a week. Does Lilith see a core of iron in Violet that even Mira is too blinded by love to see?
I have to challenge that optimistic reading of Lilith, to be honest. While it's tempting to view her as playing four-dimensional chess as a tough but loving mother, the text paints her as a zealot for the military machine.
You think it's purely institutional?
Yes, Lilith isn't pushing Violet into the quadrant because she believes in Violet's hidden strength. She is pushing her because the structure of Navarre demands that Sorrengails are riders. It's about legacy and utility.
Wow, so it's just about the family name on a military roster.
Pretty much. Lilith's coldness establishes the absolute boundary of the military. By acting as the ultimate antagonist, Lilith completely severs any safety net Violet might have hoped for.
Because if she showed any warmth, Violet would just try to run back to her.
Exactly. If Lilith showed an ounce of pity, Violet might cling to the hope of being rescued. By being utterly ruthless, Lilith forces Violet into a corner where her only option is to instantly become a survivor.
It's extreme tough love then. But heavy on the extreme, light on the love. It really makes you wonder what Lilith knows about the macro state of the war that makes her so desperate to turn her scribe daughter into a weapon regardless of the cost.
That is the crucial underlying thread right there. Lilith's actions hint at a massive, unspoken desperation within the Navarrian High Command. They are willing to sacrifice their own children to maintain the ranks of the Riders.
Which is deeply unsettling. But for Violet, the immediate effect is that she enters the quadrant completely isolated, relying entirely on her own wits and Mira's parting advice.
And that advice was very specific.
It was. Mira gave her two very specific, very urgent directives before leaving her at the college. Number 1, find her childhood best friend, Dain Ados, for safety. And number 2, stay as far away from a guy named Saidan Rierson as humanly possible.
But as Violet quickly learns, in the Riders Quadrant, the concept of safety is a complete illusion.
Let's unpack the dichotomy between these two men, Dain and Saidan, because they represent two totally different paths for her.
Chapters 3, 4, and 9 heavily feature the contrasting influences and psychological profiles of these two characters. So let's start with Dain Ados. He is Violet's oldest childhood friend, and he is currently a second-year squad leader.
And his magic is pretty unique.
Very. His signet power, his magical ability, is incredibly invasive. He can read a person's recent memories simply by touching their temples or face.
And from the moment Violet crosses the parapet, Dain is constantly, relentlessly trying to pressure her into fleeing to the scribe quadrant. He tells her over and over that she doesn't belong, that she's going to die.
He even tries to interfere with her medical care.
Yes. He actively tries to intervene with the healers in Chapter 6 so they won't fix her broken arm. He actually wants her to remain injured, hoping the medical disqualification will force her out of the Riders.
Which is just wild.
It is. He thinks he's saving her life, but he's completely undermining her autonomy and her agency.
Dane's behavior is deeply problematic because it is rooted in a fundamental lack of faith in Violet's abilities. He views her strictly through the lens of their past, the fragile, sheltered girl in the library.
He still sees her as that little girl.
Exactly. He treats her as a damsel in distress who needs to be managed. Every action he takes, while ostensibly protective, reinforces the toxic idea that she is inherently incapable of surviving or adapting to this environment. He refuses to see who she is becoming.
And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have Xaden Rierson. He's a third-year wing leader, incredibly lethal. His signet is shadow wielding, which allows him to manipulate darkness and step through shadows.
Such a cool visual power.
Totally. And there's a massive, incredibly bloody feud between their families. Violet's mother, General Lilith, personally executed Xaden's father for leading a rebellion against Navarre. And Xaden's father allegedly killed Violet's older brother, Brennan.
So they have every reason to hate each other.
Right. Mira specifically warned Violet that Xaden would kill her the very first chance he got.
Yet Xaden's actions consistently contradict Mira's warning. In Chapter 3, during the sorting ceremony where cadets are assigned to their specific wings, Xaden uses his authority to deliberately maneuver Dane's squad, which includes Violet, into his own fourth wing.
Why would he want his worst enemy's daughter in his wing?
That's a question. He places the daughter of the woman who executed his father directly under his own command. It's a highly calculated, politically charged move that suggests he has plans for her that go far beyond simple revenge.
The dynamic between them is just electric. Look at Chapter 9, when Xaden actually discovers Violet's secret poison strategy. If he wanted her dead, all he had to do was expose her to the leadership or the other cadets. They would tear her apart for fighting dirty.
Easily. It would have been the end for her.
But he doesn't say a word to anyone. Instead, he challenges her to a fight on the sparring mat. He dominates the fight, obviously, but he uses it as this brutal teaching moment.
He essentially gives her a masterclass in survival.
Yeah, he warns her that relying on poison will stunt her growth, that it will prevent her from actually improving her physical combat skills. He tells her she has to find her own unique way to fight, and he gives her the nickname Violence.
That nickname is a masterclass in shifting character dynamics. By calling her Violence, Xaden is explicitly acknowledging and respecting her inherent lethality.
He sees right past the EDS.
Yes. He looks completely past her physical fragility, past the illness, and sees the lethal, calculating intellect underneath. While Dane tries to hide her away in a padded room, Xaden pulls her out into the open, hands her a weapon, and demands that she adapt and fight back.
I want to frame this through a psychological lens using an analogy, because when you read the source material, Dane is the ultimate helicopter parent.
Oh, 100%.
He is trying to wrap Violet in bubble wrap, desperately trying to sneak her out the back door of the college. But by doing that, he is actually handicapping her. He is denying her the chance to build the calluses and the skills she absolutely needs to survive in a world that is inherently dangerous.
He's stunting her growth.
Exactly. Xaden, on the other hand, is the coach who throws you into the deep end of the ocean. But he makes sure you have a snorkel. He makes it abundantly clear that the water is deep, the currents are deadly, and there are sharks. But he gives her the tools and the respect to figure out how to swim. Which one of those approaches actually prepares you for reality?
The contrast is profound, and it maps perfectly onto Violet's internal journey. Dane represents her past, a life of perceived safety, a life of strict rules, of being defined entirely by her physical limitations. He wants to preserve the Violet that existed before Conscription Day.
But she can't be that Violet anymore.
No, she can't. Xaden represents her necessary future. He embodies adaptation, ruthlessness, breaking the rules when the rules are designed to kill you, and finding authentic, untested strength. Xaden realizes that in a world governed by fire-breathing dragons and a 400-year war, bottle wrap will just melt. You need to forge armor.
That is exactly it. You need armor. And Xaden is carrying some incredibly heavy armor of his own, because Xaden isn't just a wing leader. He is the highest-profile son of a traitor.
Which brings a whole new layer to the story.
Right. His status introduces us to a massive, kingdom-wide conspiracy that is simmering just beneath the surface of the War College. Let's dive into the world building here, specifically focusing on chapters 5 and 7 and the lore surrounding the Marked Ones.
The world building around the Marked Ones is the linchpin for understanding the political tension in Fourth Wing. The Marked Ones are the children of the rebellion leaders who were executed by Violet's mother 5 years prior.
The Navarian leadership didn't just stop at the parents, did they?
No, they didn't. They enacted a brutal, systemic punishment on the children. They forced all of these children to conscript into the Riders Quadrant, the deadliest quadrant with the highest mortality rate, as a form of blood penance for their parents' treason.
And they didn't just conscript them, they physically marked them. Tell us about the rebellion relics.
At the time of the mass executions, General Melgren's dragon, a massive, legendary beast named Koda, breathed fire near the children. The ambient magic of that dragon fire left permanent, swirling magical tattoos on their skin.
So they're literally branded.
Yes, these relics physically brand them as the offspring of traitors for the rest of their lives. But the text reveals it also had a massive, unintended magical consequence. General Melgren's signet power is battle foresight. He can literally see the outcome of a battle before it happens, which makes Navarre's army practically invincible.
Okay, so he's basically omniscient on the battlefield.
Almost. However, the college discovered a strict magical limitation. If more than 3 marked ones gather in one place, their combined presence somehow scrambles or completely blocks Melgren's foresight. He goes blind to their actions.
Which leads to a wildly oppressive, paranoid military rule. Marked ones cannot legally gather in groups of more than 3. It is considered a treasonous assembly, punishable by death.
Because they terrify the leadership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in Chapter 7, Violet is out late at night gathering her poisonous berries in the woods, and she stumbles upon Veldin leading a massive, highly illegal gathering of these market kids.
It's such a pivotal moment of tension. Violet has been told her entire life that these people are her mortal enemies, that they want to overthrow her kingdom. And she catches them committing an executable offense. If she screams, they all die.
But she doesn't scream.
No. Instead of panicking or turning Xaden in, she uses her intellect to flip the power dynamic. When Xaden catches her spying, she strikes a highly calculated deal. She promises not to report the secret meeting, and in exchange, he owes her a favor.
She leverages his darkest secret to ensure her own survival. It's so smart. But the political secrets don't stop with Xaden's midnight meetings.
Oh, the battle brief in Chapter 5 is huge.
Right. In Chapter 5, during a battle brief, which is essentially a high-level military intelligence class, Violet sits and listens to the reports of Griffin attacks from Poromail on border villages.
And everyone else is just taking it at face value.
Yeah, but Violet uses her scribe-level knowledge of geography, trade routes, and topography. She deduces something terrifying that the other cadets miss. She figures out that the kingdom's magical wards, the very things keeping the Griffin flyers out, are failing.
Her deduction in the battle brief is a prime example of why her academic background is a superpower. It allows her to see structural patterns that the purely martial, combat-focused writers completely overlook.
She sees the big picture.
Exactly. She realizes that these aren't just random skirmishes or raids. The enemy is systematically probing the perimeter, testing the failing magical defenses of the kingdom.
Okay, I have to interject here with a major pushback on the logic of the Navarian leadership, because this has been bugging me from the start. Think about this structurally. The kingdom knows these kids are the offspring of rebels.
They literally tattooed them with dragon fire to remind everyone.
Right, so why on earth would you force them to train to ride deadly fire-breathing dragons? Isn't that like handing the keys to the armory and a fully loaded tank to your sworn blood enemies? Why not just throw them in the infantry where they could be cannon fodder without access to weapons of mass destruction? It seems like a massive plot hole in the kingdom's logic.
I know. It absolutely seems counterintuitive at first glance, but this apparent flaw is actually a brilliant window into the arrogance of the Navarian leadership and their absolute unshakable faith in the dragons.
Wait, how so?
The military high command views the dragon bond as the ultimate loyalty test and the ultimate leash. You cannot fight against the kingdom of Navarre if Navarre's own dragons control your magic and your very life. The leadership operates on the belief that the dragons are loyal to the institution of Basgiath.
So they think the dragons will keep them in line.
Exactly. Therefore, bonding these rebel children to dragons will magically force them into compliance.
It's a magical hostage situation. They are betting that the dragons will police the rebels for them.
That's spot on. It's a bet based on institutional hubris. However, Violet's deduction about the failing wards hints that the Navarian leadership's confidence might be deeply misplaced. They are so fixated on controlling the marked ones and maintaining their rigid internal hierarchy that they are ignoring or actively hiding a much larger existential threat.
The failing wards.
Yes, the failing ward suggests that the official historical narrative about the war with Poromail is a lie. It foreshadows the terrifying reality of the Venin and the Wyvern Dark corrupted magic users that the leadership is desperately trying to keep hidden from their own cadets and citizens.
We are getting into some incredibly deep, dark geopolitical secrets there. But, all of this political maneuvering, all this grand strategy, it means absolutely nothing if a cadet can't actually survive the bonding process. Let's look at the mechanics of this world, because ultimately the dragons are the true masters of Basgiath.
To understand the stakes of Fourth Wing, you really have to understand the brutal reality of the dragons. As we see in chapters 3 and 8, dragons are not pets, they are not beasts of burden, and they are definitely not subservient to humans.
Not even a little bit.
They are highly intelligent, sentient apex predators who dictate the terms of the symbiosis. In chapter 3, during the sorting ceremony, we witness their terrifying arrival. 3 cadets panic at the sight of them and run. The dragons instantly incinerate them. The message is visceral and immediate. Cowardice is punished by death.
And the bonding process itself is called threshing. It's not a quaint matching ceremony where a magical hat sorts you into a house, right?
Yeah.
The humans are presented to the dragons in an open field, and the dragons choose. And if they don't like what they see, or if a human approaches a dragon that doesn't want them, they burn them.
It's a terrifying gauntlet.
But let's talk about the biological mechanics of the bond, specifically the mortal tether, because that changes everything.
The mortal tether is the absolute foundation of the rider's existence, and it defines the power dynamic. If a dragon dies in battle, the trauma of that severed magical connection instantly kills the human rider. It is an unavoidable physiological death sentence.
But it doesn't work the other way around, does it?
No, it doesn't. If a human rider dies, a strong dragon can survive the severing, though it is described as a deeply traumatic, painful experience that can take a dragon years to recover from.
And that leads perfectly into the heavy lore dropped in Chapter 8 by Professor Kaori. He teaches the cadets about the different breeds and the legendary historical dragons. He specifically spends time talking about Tairn, this massive, legendary black Morningstar tail dragon.
Tairn is such a fascinating figure in the lore.
He is. And Tairn hasn't bonded with anyone in years, because his previous rider, a man named Naelin, died. And Naelin didn't just die in a random skirmish. The lore suggests he died trying to siphon an immense, impossible amount of power to resurrect Violet's brother, Brennan.
The inclusion of that specific piece of lore in Chapter 8 does massive heavy lifting for the narrative. It establishes the immense, almost godlike magical capacity of Tairn, but it also humanizes, for lack of a better word, the dragons.
That shows they grieve.
Exactly. It highlights the profound grief and trauma a dragon experiences when they lose a rider. It shows that dragons are capable of deep, abiding emotional attachments, which makes the stakes of bonding even higher. And of course, there is the crucial detail that Tairn's mated pair is Sgaeyl, the terrifying, vicious, navy blue dragon who happens to be bonded to
Xaden Rierson.
Yep.
Which makes Xaden's intense, almost predatory interest in Violet during these early chapters even more complicated and layered. But let's look at the magic that actually comes from this bond. You don't just get to fly around. You gain access to raw magic.
First, cadets get basic channeling.
Right, to mend things or open locks.
Yeah.
But then, if they survive, they manifest a signet. This is their unique signature magical power.
And what's fascinating about the magic system is that a signet is not randomly assigned like a genetic lottery. The magic system is deeply psychological. The dragon provides the raw power, the fuel, but the human's core personality, their deepest subconscious needs, and their defining traits shape how that power physically manifests.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Dane's desperate need for rules, order, and objective truth manifests as his invasive memory-reading signet. Xaden's need to operate in secrecy, to hide his true motives, and to control his environment manifests as his shadow-wielding.
Let me throw an original analogy at you to try and summarize this dragon-human dynamic. It feels to me like a form of extreme magical venture capitalism.
Bro, I like where this is going.
Think about it. The dragons are the ultra-wealthy, incredibly ruthless investors. They have all the capital, the magic, the power, the flight, but they demand a highly aggressive return on their investment. They invest their capital into a human startup. If the startup performs well, manifests a strong signet, and fights effectively on the battlefield, the investor profits in the overall war effort.
But if the startup fails...
Exactly. If the startup fails, shows weakness, or mismanages the magical capital, the investor cuts their losses. Literally. They burn the failing asset to the ground, and look for a new investment.
I'll take that analogy a step further. If the dragons are the venture capitalists and the magic is the capital, the human body is just the fragile server infrastructure. If the hardware can't handle the massive influx of data and power, it crashes.
The human burns out.
Right. The dragons are entirely pragmatic about this. They do not tolerate sunk costs. And if we look at Violet through this lens, she is the ultimate high-risk, high-reward startup. She completely lacks the physical infrastructure of the other cadets, but her intellectual capital is off the charts.
She's basically all software, no hardware.
Exactly. And this psychological magic system beautifully foreshadows her eventual signet. While she appears physically fragile and easily broken, her internal core is pure, unyielding, explosive determination. When she eventually channels magic, that immense internal energy manifests as lightning wielding. She is pure, destructive, atmospheric energy trapped in a deeply fragile vessel.
Which is such a visceral, incredible concept. But to get a cadet to that point, to push them until their core personality cracks wide open and a signet emerges, the college has to put them through absolute unending hell.
The pacing never stops.
The pacing of the story itself has to push Violet to the absolute brink without letting her, or the listener, catch a single breath. Let's analyze the narrative structure here.
The literary mechanics of Fourth Wing are largely responsible for its massive, addictive popularity. The author employs a masterclass in pacing that structural analysts refer to as a steady uprise. From the very first page, the narrative eschews long, meandering prologues.
We don't start with a history lesson.
No, it drops the reader directly into the morning of conscription day. This is the classic literary technique known as in medias res, starting in the middle of the action and forcing the reader to catch up.
Yeah, there are no long, boring, flat lines of exposition where two characters just sit in a tavern and explain the political history of the world for 30 pages. Every single piece of world building is delivered under the immediate pressing threat of death.
It's brilliant multitasking by the author.
Right. When Violet is explaining the complex history of Navarre to the reader, she is doing it while balancing on an 18-inch ledge 200 feet in the air to keep herself from having a panic attack. You're learning the history, but your heart is pounding because she might slip at any second.
That is the brilliant, deliberate interplay of macro and micro pacing. The macro pacing is the overarching journey, the long arc from conscription day to the ultimate goal of bonding a dragon. The micro pacing involves the scene-by-scene physical and psychological obstacles that never let up. Chapter 10 is the perfect encapsulation of this, the gauntlet.
Oh man, the gauntlet. Let's break this sequence down because it's exhausting just to read. It's a massive vertical obstacle course designed to test the specific balance, grip strength, and agility required to stay on the back of a dragon in mid-flight.
And it is completely unforgiving.
Violet physically cannot span the distance of some of the obstacles because of her height, and her joints threaten to dislocate if she tries to use brute upper body strength to pull herself up the ramps.
During the practice runs for the gauntlet, the reality of the danger is hammered home again. A cadet named Aurelie falls to her death.
And this wasn't just a random extra.
No, this isn't just a nameless background character. This is someone in Violet's own squad, someone she's trained with. It immediately re-solidifies the stakes for the reader. It proves that the graduate or die motto is not a metaphor.
It's the literal truth.
And this is the critical moment where Xaden advises Violet that the right way isn't the only way. He encourages her to stop trying to conquer the obstacle course like a traditional soldier, and instead use her intellect and momentum to find a workaround for her physical limitations.
But I have a huge pushback here on the author's choices, and I know a lot of critical readers ask this question. Does this relentless, breakneck pacing rob you of genuine emotional depth?
That's a fair question.
If characters like Dylan in Chapter 1 or Aurelie in Chapter 10 are dying left and right in the first few chapters, do we actually have the time to mourn them or care about them? Or is it just pure action movie spectacle? Does the speed of the plot sacrifice the emotional heart of the story?
That's a highly debated critique of fast-paced genre fiction, but in this specific setting, I'd argue the opposite is true. The relentless pacing actually creates the emotional depth through the psychological mechanism of trauma bonding.
Oh, interesting. How so?
By forcing the characters and the reader into a state of highly adrenalized paranoia, the quiet moments feel incredibly profound. When Violet shares a brief, whispered moment of genuine friendship with Rhiannon, or a charged, quiet conversation with Xaden hidden in the shadows, it feels desperately hard-earned.
Because they might not survive to have another one.
Exactly. The emotional connections are forged in the crucible of constant, immediate danger. The pacing forces the characters to strip away all pretense, all small talk, and connect on a primal level. The speed doesn't sacrifice the heart, it exposes it, raw and beating.
That makes perfect sense when you frame it that way. The brief moments of humanity shine so much brighter because the surrounding darkness is moving so incredibly fast. It's like finding a quiet, still room in the absolute center of a hurricane. You value the quiet more because you know it's raging outside the door.
The constant threat of violent loss heightens the emotional stakes of every single interaction. You never know if the person you are speaking to will be on the death roll tomorrow morning.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've walked those fatal, wind-whipped first steps on the parapet. We've decoded the brilliant, somewhat terrifying survival strategies of a fragile scribe who uses botanical knowledge and poison to secure her safety in a combat zone.
We really went through it all.
We did. We've navigated the deeply complex, bruising webs of family expectations with General Lilith's sociopathic tough love and Mira's tactical care. We've analyzed the contrasting mentorships of Dane's suffocating bubble-wrap safety versus Agzen's lethal, empowering demands. And we've looked deeply at the awe-inspiring, ruthless world of dragon symbiosis and the brilliant narrative pacing that makes this entire world so impossible to put down.
It is a dense, masterfully constructed beginning to a narrative. And the core takeaway we want to distill from all of these sources, the reviews, the extensive summaries, the psychological character arcs, is this. Violet Sorrengail survives her impossible circumstances, not by trying to emulate the brute strength of those around her, but by fiercely, unapologetically leaning into her unique cognitive strengths.
Which is such an empowering message.
It is. When the world demands physical force, she realizes that sometimes the absolute sharpest weapon you can wield is a well-read mind, a deep understanding of the systemic rules, and a cleverly poisoned breakfast.
Never underestimate the scribe with a handful of berries and a solid understanding of the penal code. It's a powerful lesson in adaptability. You can't always change the brutal rules of the game you've been forced to play, but you can absolutely change how you navigate the board.
And as we reflect on Violet's journey of survival, we must inevitably cast a critical eye on the massive military institution that forced her into this crucible in the first place.
Which brings us to our final thought. I want you to mull this over long after we wrap up today. Think back to early on in that battle brief in Chapter 5, where Violet uses her intellect to deduce that the magical wards protecting the entire kingdom of Navarre are actively failing.
A terrifying realization.
Now, consider the sheer, institutionalized brutality of Basgiath War College. If the highest leaders of this society, people like General Lilith Sorrengail, are willing to systematically, ruthlessly sacrifice 15% of their own youth on day one just to maintain their military order, what absolutely terrifying truth about the outside world are those failing wards hiding?
It makes you wonder.
If this is how they treat their own children to prepare them for war, is the institution teaching these cadets to survive actually the very entity setting them